So in this video from Chapter 1, Section 1, Example 2, we're going to look at finding X and Y intercepts. So we're told the car starts a journey with a full tank of gas, and the equation y equals 16 minus 0.05x, which is shown in the graph below, relates the number of gallons of gas y left in the tank to the number of miles the car has traveled, which is x. What are the X and Y intercepts of the graph? Okay, so that's the first question. What are the X and Y intercepts of this equation, and what do they represent about the situation? So that'll be equation or question 2. So we know that the number of gallons of gas, Y, is what is left in the tank. And then the number of miles a car has traveled is X. All right, so distance traveled would be X, and the gas remaining is Y. So let's label this. Let's say that's Y, and this is X. So question 1, what are the X and Y intercepts of the graph of this equation? Okay, so let's start with the X-intercept. All right, our X-intercept is where the graph crosses the equation crosses the X-axis. So my X-axis down here, sorry about that, my X-axis down here, where does the graph cross? Well, it crosses right here. All right, and that's at 320. So my X-intercept is 320. Intercepts are going to be written as coordinate points. So the X value is going to be 320. And now we just need to determine the Y value. Well, along the X-axis, what is my Y? Well, my Y is 0. So I have a X-intercept of 320 and 0. Now let's look at our Y-intercept. So the Y-intercept is the same idea. It's where the graph, this time, crosses the Y-axis. My equation, my line, crosses the Y-axis at 16. So again, you want to write this as a coordinate point. What does that mean? Well, I know my Y is 16. What is my X? The X value, again, we're not moving left or right along the X-axis at all, so that tells me that the X value is 0. What's important to note here, and you're going to see this again in the next problem, is when you're looking for intercepts, so if I'm looking for my X-intercept, my Y value is going to be 0, and in my Y-intercept, my X value is going to be 0. It's always going to be the reverse. So if you're looking for X-intercepts, your Y is 0, and when you're looking for Y-intercepts, your X is 0. Now let's answer the second question. What do they represent about the situation? All right, so what do the X and Y intercepts actually tell us in this specific problem? Well, going back to our X-intercept down here, all right, what does it show me? Well, 320 miles into my trip, something is going to happen. What is that? Well, the gas is left, gas remaining is 0. So this tells me that 320 miles into the trip, the car runs out of gas. Now there are other ways to phrase that. You could say that the gas tank is empty after 320 miles. However you want to phrase it is fine. But the idea is that at 320 miles, you're going to have an empty tank. Now what does my Y-intercept tell me? Well, again, the Y-intercept tells me that X is 0. All right, what does X represent? X is the distance traveled. So here, when I have 16 gallons of gas, what have I done? Well, I haven't traveled yet. So this tells me that, let's say, at the start of the trip, the car or the tank had 16 gallons of gas. Again, are there other ways to phrase that? Absolutely. However you want to phrase it is fine. The main thing to remember for this type of question with dealing with X and Y intercepts is for X-intercepts, your Y is 0, Y-intercepts, your X is 0. Okay, they're always opposite. So let's look at question or part B. It says, what are the x and y intercepts of the graph y equals the absolute value of x minus 3? So let's start with the x-intercept. As we mentioned in the previous part, whenever we're looking for an x-intercept, we know that y is 0. Now this time I don't have a graph, so we're going to try and calculate this algebraically. So what are the x and y intercepts of the graph? Well, let's start. I know my equation is y equals the absolute value of x minus 3. What do I know about x-intercepts? What is always true? Well, for my x-intercepts, y is always 0. So I'm going to make y 0 in this problem. So every x-intercept, y is always 0. So let's do that. I'm going to solve my equation by adding 3 to each side. So I get 3 is equal to the absolute value of x, which tells me that x is equal to positive and negative 3. So my x-intercepts, I actually have 2 of them in this case. The first one would be 3, 0, and the second one would be negative 3, 0. So those are my x-intercepts. Let's look at the y-intercept. Again, what do we know about all y-intercepts? If we go back to the previous part, y-intercepts, the x is always 0. So I'm going to take my equation and I'm going to substitute 0 in for x. This one becomes pretty simple. The absolute value of 0 is 0, so 0 minus 3. Y would be equal to negative 3. So for my y-intercept, I only have 1 in this case. My y-intercept would be 0, negative 3. You do want to be careful when you're writing the answers. Remember that the y-intercept should have x0, just don't mix them up. So main idea, x-intercepts, we know that y is equal to 0. Y-intercepts, we know that x is equal to 0. So this is something to always keep in mind. What I can also do is I can try and graph this. So if I'm using Desmos here, let's write this out quickly. We can say that y is equal to the absolute value of x minus 3. Now if I look at my graph, it's going to rearrange this a little bit. Going back here, I had x-intercepts of 3, 0, negative 3, 0. Well, on my graph, my x-axis, I cross at negative 3, 0 and 3, 0. And then my y-intercept was 0, negative 3, which is where my y-axis is. So that graph just confirms the algebraic work that I did. If you don't have access to a graph or you can't graph something, sometimes it is easier to do it algebraically by making sure that you do this. X-intercepts are y equals 0, y-intercepts x equals 0. Try the try-it problem. Keep in mind that something like g of x, an equation like this, can be rewritten as y equals 4 minus x squared. All right, so your g of x function can be written as y. Give it a try, and in another video I'll have an explanation on how to do that.